Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're going to be talking about my top 10 dice-driven board games. Now, I love games that use dice in really fun and fascinating ways, and modern board gaming has introduced some really cool ways to take actions or draft them. You'll see on the list. It's more than just rolling to move or rolling to resolve. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the list with my number 10. Number 10 is going to go to the game Camel Up. You play as a bunch of gamblers doing your best to make money off of this camel race that's going on in front of you. Now you're going to do the best you can to make predictions so that you can accurately guess who's going to be first in each leg and hopefully the entire race. In this game, the dice are used to move the camels around. On your turn, as an option, you can get $1 and roll the dice at the table. Now, when you do this, not only are you going to move the camels, but you're also going to be giving information to everyone else at the table. So, do you on your turn take a risky play and hopefully try to predict the outcome of the leg, or do you get more information for yourself and everybody else? It's a nice balance of knowing when to bid and when to be reserved with your gambling. So I really like the way it's done here. In addition, in the second edition, there is this extra die in the game that's going to move these crazy camels. And the way they work is they actually run backward. The camels will actually carry each other on their backs here. And if the crazy camels do, they'll start carrying people the other way. And I think it's a neat little twist in this great edition of a fantastic game. So that's my number 10, Camel Up 2nd Edition. My number 9 goes to the game Project Elite, a game where you play as a bunch of space marines doing your best to annihilate this alien force. Now you have a mission of some sort that you'll be taking on, and you're going to be shooting up all sorts of these crazy aliens with your lasers while bosses spawn, but ultimately you got to complete that objective in a real-time environment. Now, the way that the dice work in this game are they're your actions. You'll have 2 minutes to where you can roll the dice as many times as you want. You'll have these symbols that have these different icons that you can use to activate things. The little arrows let you move. This little gun thing lets you activate your guns here. They actually let you fire. When you fire your weapons, you'll roll these number dice, and you're trying to get a specific number and hit. However, my favorite thing about this are on the action dice, one of the faces is this red movement die. And if you hit a red action die, you have to move the enemies. So if you hit one of these, it's going to cause them to advance on you, which is kind of funny because the franticness of this game is you could accidentally move a character that maybe somebody was about to shoot, and that kind of replicates them dodging. This is really cool because the more often and the more actions you're able to get for your character, you're also inversely giving the enemy aliens more opportunity to move and battle. So it's a great little system. I really like the way it works, and it really keeps you engaged and doing your best the entire time. I love this one. That's Project Elite. My number 8 goes to the game Las Vegas Royale. In this game, you play as a bunch of casino lords, doing your best to make money by controlling different casinos. Now, the way the game works with the dice in particular is you'll roll all the dice in this tray in the middle, and you'll pick one of the numbers that appear. Whatever number you pick, you'll take all the dice of that number and place them at the casino. At the end of the round, whoever has the most dice of that number at that casino is going to get the largest amount of money that's there. Now, the twist here comes when 2 players have the same number of dice at a casino. Their numbers actually cancel out, and then anybody else who's there, they're going to get the money instead. So it's a great little concept of knowing when to push into certain casinos for certain cash and when to allocate your dice to other areas. This new edition of the game introduces a bunch of little casino games as well that have lots of new ways to use the dice, including some neutral player dice or things of that sort. So there's lots of new things to discover and ways to explore the game. So I really like this one. That's my number 8, Las Vegas Royale. My number 7 goes to the game Castles of Burgundy, a very straightforward tile placement game where you're going to be using your dice to pick up tiles and then using those same dice to place them into your duchy in front of you. Now, my favorite part about this game is the variety that comes from the tiles and how simple the dice system is. You have these worker tokens that you can use to modify your dice, and they do wrap around, and you can just use them for all sorts of actions. I like how the science tiles allow you to modify these dice numbers. It's a simple, straightforward system that still holds up to this day. That's my number 7, the Castles of Burgundy. My number 6 goes to the game Cthulhu Death May Die. In this game, you play as investigators doing your best to stop an evil cult from summoning a giant monster. But it's too late, so you're going to have to defeat that monster by finding its weakness first and disrupting the ritual. So this game has you playing as a bunch of investigators, and as your turn goes from turn to turn, you'll be rolling dice to perform tests. A lot of the time, it'll say, make a roll. When you're attacking, when you're doing something for the scenario, and when you make a roll, each of those exclamation points is a success. However, there are also stars on these faces that may do special things based on who you are. If you're an arcane master, they may be additional successes. Or you'll get the tentacle symbol, and the tentacle symbol is going to be madness. And every time you roll this, you may have to increase your madness level, which could trigger your personal madness. But when you do, you also get to increase your special abilities. So I really like this dice system, and I like how they pair tentacles to successes sometimes. So maybe you keep a success, but it might push you over the edge into more madness. So I like the risk management here, and I love the reroll system. There's a stress track that you'll have on your board. That's your amount of rerolls, and you can always spend an action to refresh your stress. So I really like how the rerolls are thought about in this game, and I like how core and integral the roll system is overall. So this is a great game. That is Cthulhu Death May Die, my number 6. My number 5 goes to the game Trois. In Trois, you play as a bunch of people trying to gain influence in all sorts of areas of the city by defending it or working for merchants, knights, clergy. You have lots of different routes to go. But the core of this game is the dice system. So you're going to have these little workers on the board, and they'll be in these houses, and each worker you have produces a dice for you. You'll roll them up, put them in your little depot, and then on your turn, you pick any dice from anywhere to take an action. So this captain here, for example, it requires you to use up to 3 red dice. You divide that number by 4 of the pips on the dice, and then you take the action that it says that many times. This is such a great system, and I love that every time you play, these different characters that you're going to be visiting are going to be different. So you have lots of different things that you can achieve. I really, really, really like this system, but my favorite thing is that you can actually use the dice that your opponents roll. So on your turn, you can pick dice from your depot or others, and each die that you borrow is going to cost money, and you pay it to that person. Every time you're borrowing those dice, though, you're fueling your opponents to be able to do the same or take more impressive actions. There's some really cool things that you can do with low numbers and high numbers. You can spend influence to reroll dice, and you can also spend a lot of influence to flip your dice. So it's really nice when you have low numbers in front of you because sometimes your opponents aren't going to want to take those. So on your turn, you can spend influence, flip them, and all of a sudden you've taken a poor position into a winning one. This is such a great game. I love the dice system, and I love the way that the action system works with those dice pips. Fantastic game. That's my number 5, Trois. My number 4 goes to the game Role Player. In Role Player, you play as fantasy characters, building up your stats in order to go on a big adventure. Now, I normally only play this with the Monsters and Minions and Fiends and Familiars expansion, so you're actually going to take this character afterwards and send them on a quest to go defeat this giant monster. Now, the game itself is very straightforward. It's a dice drafting game. You'll roll a number of dice, and on your turn, you'll pick one of these dice. The higher the number, though, the lower you'll go in initiative order during the market phase. So there are these cards you'll be able to buy, so you'll get the worst pick out of the lot. So you've got some cool choices here, and I really like the way that you're building up your dice here. Now what you're seeing here is kind of an ideal board, so you'll probably never look like this, but you're doing your best in order to get all of your numbers to specific values to not only reach these different color bonuses, but also these specific value bonuses. You're going to be collecting these trait cards along the way to score additional points, but it's such a sound, solid system. Now, my favorite part about this game has to be the different item cards. I love how they take the system and they change it up just nicely, or these trait cards, these blue cards on the bottom here, they'll give you additional objectives that you can try to complete, which will change your game up drastically. Like this character here, he wants all the same color in all the rows. Oh my gosh, that seems so difficult, but this person's done it. Amazing. So I really like this game. I love the puzzle that it provides, and this is one, the more and more I play it, the more I enjoy it. I just want to keep coming back to it. That's Role Player, my number 4. My number 3 goes to the game Coimbra, where you play as characters doing your best to spread your influence all throughout Portugal by recruiting nobles and by completing these large voyages. Now, the way this game works, the dice in particular, it's a dice drafting game very similarly to Role Player, but when you take those dice, you're taking them for lots of different reasons. The first thing is when you take a die, you'll place them into one of these bidding rows, and whoever places the bidding row first and the highest is going to go to the left side. So every time you place a die, that determines your order to pick cards from that row. So each row is going to have lots of different characters. Now, in addition to the dice value being your order, it's also the cost of the cards. And I love this system. So not only are you going in order, but you're paying more for cards, which means if you go last, you could pick some really good cards for real cheap. But seeing as they're really good, that's probably not going to happen. So you have this really interesting choice of when do I spend a lot to guarantee first pick, or when do I spend low in order to just gain value out of my actions. And the kicker on this is every time you take a die, the die color is going to determine which of your income tracks you trigger. You can get points, movement, currency. It is so wonderful. What a great system. I love this one. That is Coimbra. My number 2 goes to Middara, Unintentional Malum Act 1. This is a giant JRPG-inspired fantasy game where you're going to be going through dungeon after dungeon, fighting monsters, leveling up your characters, getting equipment, and doing your best to use your skills to take down whatever objective you have in front of you. Now, this game is huge and sprawling, but the coolest thing it does has to be the dice system. So in this game, you'll have all of these dice that have these not only numbers, but different symbols on them. And the higher upgraded your dice are, the more different symbols and higher numbers there are. You also have this cool black die that you can add into your rolls in order to get additional symbols by spending a little bit of extra stamina or using a special ability. So I really like this system right off the bat where you can clearly see how your dice will improve. Purple is the worst, and then this nice gray one is just incredibly strong. So I like that there's a nice progression to these dice. Now that being said, whenever you do use a weapon, it'll actually tell you what dice to use. And some things allow you to upgrade those dice with keywords like finesse, and I really like this ability, how pairing different weapons is going to get you different dice combination. After you roll the dice, you can use those symbols. You see that little bottom here, it's got a little symbol that says +1 physical damage. If you roll that, you can use it as many times as you want. So you might roll that black die just to get those extra symbols. I think it's just such a solid sound system, and it makes this game fun. You're gathering your dice, you're rolling them, you're hoping for certain things, you're taking re-rolls, you're using maybe one-time effects just to get one more pip value, and if you deal damage, you can use all those symbols and deal even more. It's such a solid system, one that I'm really enjoying. That is Middara, Unintentional Malum, Act 1. And lastly, it had to be number 1. This is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is a dice-driven game of fantasy proportions where you are going on a small adventure over a couple of hours and doing your best to level up your character with their own personal tech tree. Now, everything in this game is poker chips and dice, and the dice are how you're going to be performing lots of the actions and kind of checking statuses and conditions, counters, whatever it is going to be on dice, and I love that about this game. So on your turn, you'll be taking a number of dice equal to your stamina level, rolling them out, and then allocating their effects. And I love this system because every time you win an encounter, you'll get some training points that you can use on your skill dice, and that'll give you your special one-time abilities that you can use during the game, or you can use them to upgrade your stats, which are also tracked on dice. Now, the game is really, really cool. I love the way that all of the dice are listed here on these character sheets. You'll have all of this information at your fingertips. I love how clearly laid out these information sheets are, and all you need is that sheet in order to really get familiar with your character. You're usually leveling up only 1 or 2 training points at a time, so it doesn't have to be too overwhelming, particularly because a lot of these skill trees are going to start from one place and end at another. You can go down one path during one game, and then if you're feeling risky, you can change it up the next game with the same character. So there's lots of different ways that you can play the same character and have different adventures. There's so much variety here with all that you can do, and this is one that I am loving and I'm still enjoying to this day. I can't wait for the new stuff from Unbreakable, but this dice system and just everything about it is so golden. I didn't even mention the bones. Whenever you miss, sometimes you'll get these bones. You can use those bones to trigger these special abilities on a battle plan. This is such a solid system. You're not completely punished for missing. That's so good. I love this. And sometimes you're digging for bones to get a special ability you might not have otherwise. What a wonderful, refreshing concept. And still, it's been out for about 4 years now, and it's still going strong. That is Too Many Bones, my number 1. And that's the list. Those are my top 10 dice-driven board games. What did you think of my picks? Do you agree with any of them? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.